All right, let's talk about Flutter. By 2025, it's become this absolute powerhouse. We're going to dive into how it went from just another mobile tool to running the apps on our phones, the screens in our cars, and a whole lot more. It all comes down to one big idea: owning the pixels.
So, before we get into the nuts and bolts, let's just take a second to appreciate how big Flutter has become. This isn't some niche framework for startups anymore. We're talking about a mature, enterprise-level technology that some of the biggest companies in the world now rely on.
And look at this list. What's really wild here is the kind of software we're talking about. These aren't just little side project apps. We're talking mission-critical systems. The infotainment screen in your Toyota, Alibaba's gigantic e-commerce platform, even core desktop apps for the Ubuntu operating system. These companies are betting their products on Flutter.
Now, to really get why these giants made that bet, we have to rewind a bit. We need to understand the painful problem that Flutter was built to solve. For years, if you wanted to build an app for both iOS and Android, you were stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Developers basically had two bad choices. On one side, you had what we call WebView apps. Think of it as a website just kind of stuffed inside an app's body. It never felt quite right, always a little laggy, a little off. You were stuck in this performance uncanny valley. On the other side, you had bridged frameworks. These tried to talk to the phone's native parts, but every single tap or swipe had to go over this slow, clunky bridge. And that bridge was a bottleneck that caused lag, glitches, and all sorts of headaches.
And this is where Flutter comes in with a totally radical idea. One that didn't just choose a side in the dilemma, it sidestepped the whole thing. This is the core concept that changed everything.
So, how do you get away from all the problems and inconsistencies caused by the platform's own components? It's actually pretty simple, in a genius kind of way. You just stop asking the platform for permission. This quote just nails it. Flutter acts more like a video game engine than a traditional app framework. It goes to the phone's operating system and says, hey, just give me a blank screen, a canvas, I'll handle the rest. And then it draws every single pixel itself, the button, the text, the animations, everything. This gives it absolute control, which means that button is going to look and feel exactly the same whether it's on an iPhone, an Android, or a desktop.
Okay, but an idea that big needs some serious engineering firepower to back it up, right? You can't just draw everything yourself and hope it's fast. And this is where we get into Flutter's secret sauce.
The choice of the Dart programming language was so deliberate. It was the key to doing two things that sound like they should be impossible at the same time: making development crazy fast for the programmer while making the final app lightning fast for the user.
Here's the magic trick. While a developer is actually writing code, Dart uses something called a just-in-time, or JIT compiler. It compiles code on the fly, as you go, and that is what unlocks Flutter's most legendary feature.
And that feature is stateful hot reload. It means a developer can change a line of code, hit save, and see the result in the app, like in under a second, all without losing their place or restarting the app. It's an incredible boost to productivity. But that's just for development. When it's time to ship the app to users, Dart flips a switch and uses an ahead-of-time compiler. It turns all that code into super-fast, native machine code. So you really do get the best of both worlds: insane developer speed and true native performance for the user.
Now, to make sure all that custom drawing is still super efficient, Flutter uses this really clever three-tree system. You can think of the widget tree as the blueprint for what your screen should look like. The element tree is like the project manager. It looks at the new blueprint, compares it to the old one, and figures out the absolute minimum that needs to change. And then the render object tree is the painter who comes in and only paints those tiny little changes. It's all about working smart, not hard, to keep things smooth. And the final piece of the performance puzzle, the thing that really cemented Flutter's reputation in 2025, is the rendering engine called Impeller. It was designed to solve one specific, annoying problem from the early days: jank. You know that little stutter an animation might have the very first time it runs? That's jank. Impeller totally gets rid of it by getting all the graphics work done ahead of time. The result? Buttery smooth animations right from the very first frame.
So, with all this amazing tech under the hood, where does Flutter actually fit in today in 2025? How does it stack up against its biggest rivals?
This chart breaks it down perfectly. Flutter, with its own custom engine, is the undisputed king when you need that brand design to be pixel-perfect and consistent across every single device. React Native is still a phenomenal choice, especially for teams that already have a ton of web development talent. And then you have Kotlin Multiplatform, or KMP, which is a whole different ballgame.
It's not really about sharing the UI, it's about sharing the brain, the business logic, behind the scenes, while letting the UI be 100% native on both iOS and Android. But, the most exciting part of the Flutter story in 2025 might not even be about phones anymore. That core philosophy of owning the pixels, well, it has unlocked a whole new world of possibilities.
I mean, think about it. Since Flutter brings its own rendering engine, its own paint and canvas, it doesn't really care what device it's on. It's powering the dashboard in your Toyota. It's building the installer for the Ubuntu desktop. It's even running on smart home gadgets and other electronics. All it needs is a screen to draw on. So here's the real takeaway. Flutter made a huge, risky bet on this idea of owning the pixels, and it has paid off in a massive way. It has completely transformed from just another mobile framework into a truly universal canvas, a single tool for building beautiful interfaces on almost any screen you can imagine.
And that leaves us with one last, really big question to think about. As our world gets filled with more and more screens on our wrists, in our cars, on our appliances, maybe even on our faces, is this self-contained, own the pixels approach the ultimate strategy for the future? Is this how we're going to build everything from now on? It definitely makes you wonder.